What happened if you got injured in the Stone Age? You think getting injured today is annoying. You cut your finger, you complain, you wash it, you put on a bandage, and then you spend the next 2 days showing everyone the wound like you survived a bear attack. But in the Stone Age, a small injury was not just an inconvenience. It was a question. Can you still walk? Can you still gather food? Can you still run? Can you still carry wood? Can you still sleep without the wound turning into a tiny, angry swamp? Because before hospitals, antibiotics, x-rays, stitches, painkillers, disinfectant, pharmacies, emergency rooms, and that one friend who thinks every injury can be solved with coconut oil, your body had to negotiate directly with nature. And nature was not a gentle nurse. Nature was more like a tired manager saying, "Unfortunately, we do not offer refunds." So what happened if you got injured in the Stone Age? The short answer is, it depended. The better answer is, your survival depended on the injury, the environment, your knowledge, your group, and whether your immune system felt heroic that week. There was no single Stone Age experience. A small cut near a clean camp might heal. A small cut filled with dirt, animal waste, and bad luck might become a serious infection. A broken finger might ruin your ability to make tools. A broken leg might turn your entire life into a community project. A tooth infection might become the villain of your whole skull. Modern people like to imagine danger as dramatic. A saber-toothed cat, a mammoth charge, a heroic spear fight under the moon. But many ancient threats were much less cinematic. A thorn, a fall, a bite, a burn, a stone tool slipping at exactly the wrong moment. A twisted ankle while carrying food, a tiny wound that invited bacteria to move in and start a family. The Stone Age did not need dramatic music to be dangerous. It had infection, and infection is basically horror with no soundtrack. Start with a cut. Today, if you cut your hand, the biggest danger is usually that you will become incredibly annoying about it. In the Stone Age, that same cut could affect everything. Hands were tools. Hands made tools. Hands carried food, scraped hides, gathered plants, cracked nuts, held children, climbed rocks, made fire, and pointed dramatically at suspicious mushrooms. If your hand was injured, you were not just in pain, you were less useful to yourself. A deep cut could bleed. It could become dirty. It could swell. It could make gripping difficult. It could stop you from holding a spear, digging roots, or shaping stone. And there was no little white box full of sterile bandages waiting in a bathroom cabinet. People had to use what they had. They could rinse wounds with water if clean water was available. They could cover wounds with leaves, fibers, bark, animal hide, or plant materials. They could apply pressure to stop bleeding. They could keep a wound protected. They could use fire, smoke, heat, scraping, or plant knowledge in ways that varied by time and place. But the key word is could. Not every group had the same knowledge. Not every place had the same plants. Not every season gave you the same resources. And not every wound politely waited until the group had finished breakfast. A wound in a dry environment might behave differently from a wound in a wet, muddy, insect-filled place, where every tiny creature looks at your skin and says, "Real estate opportunity." Then there were burns. Fire was one of humanity's greatest tools. It cooked food, warmed bodies, scared animals, hardened wooden tools, and turned the night from absolute terror into medium terror. But fire is also fire. It does not care that you are using it for civilization. A careless moment could burn a hand, a foot, or a leg. A spark could land where sparks should not land. A child could stumble too close. A sleeping person could roll toward danger. A burn could be painful, disabling, and vulnerable to infection. And unlike today, you could not run to a pharmacy and buy a cream with a name that sounds like a spaceship. You had cool water if you had it. You had plant knowledge if your group knew it. You had rest if your group could afford to let you rest. That last part matters. Injuries were not only medical problems, they were social problems. If you could not move, someone else had to help. If you could not gather food, someone else had to share. If you could not carry your own child, someone else had to carry them. If you could not keep up with the group had a decision to make. And this is where the old cartoon of prehistoric life gets it wrong. People imagine a brutal world where only the strongest survived and everyone else was immediately turned into a cautionary lesson. But archaeology tells a more complicated story. Some ancient people survived injuries that would have made life very difficult without help. One famous example is Shanidar I, a Neanderthal from Shanidar Cave in Iraq. His skeleton shows multiple serious injuries that healed, including damage that likely affected his arm, leg, and vision. Researchers estimate he lived into older adulthood for a Neanderthal, which suggests he probably survived with support from others. That does not mean prehistoric life was soft. It means humans and our close relatives were social, and social animals can do something extremely powerful. They can keep injured people alive. Not always, not perfectly, not with magical cave doctors wearing little bone stethoscopes, but sometimes. Enough to matter. A broken bone is where things became serious. Today, if you break your leg, people say, "Oh no, that's terrible," and then they ask if they can sign your cast. In the Stone Age, if you broke your leg, nobody was signing anything. They were asking a much colder question. Can this person move? Because mobility was survival. You needed to walk to food. You needed to move with seasons. You needed to avoid danger. You needed to reach water. You needed to not become the slowest option in a predator's lunch plan. A simple fracture might heal if the bone stayed aligned and the person could rest. A bad fracture could heal poorly. A compound fracture, where bone broke through the skin, could be catastrophic because now the injury had invited the outside world inside. And the outside world was filthy. Stone Age people were not stupid. They could splint limbs. They could use sticks, bark, fibers, hides, and bindings. They could immobilize injuries through practical knowledge. They could carry or support a person. They could reduce movement. But they did not have modern surgery. They did not have antibiotics. They did not have x-rays. They could not check whether the bone looked fine on a screen while a doctor made the concerned face. They had pain, experience, memory, and trial and error. Mostly error, because trial and error is just science before paperwork. If a bone healed, it might heal crooked. A limp might remain for life. A hand might lose strength. A shoulder might never move the same way. A jaw injury might make eating harder. And in a world where chewing tough food, carrying loads, climbing, digging, and making tools were daily tasks, a permanent injury could reshape your entire role in the group. But it did not automatically make you useless. That is important. A person who could not run might still remember where water appears after rain. A person with a damaged arm might still teach children which plants are safe. A person with a limp might still make tools, prepare food, tell stories, tend fire, watch children, track seasons, or help process hides. Survival was not one job, it was many jobs. And a group that only valued spear throwing would be a very stupid group. A heroic hunter is nice. A person who knows which mushroom will not turn dinner into a funeral is also nice. Possibly nicer. Then there were animal injuries. The Stone Age was full of animals with very strong opinions about personal space. Some animals kicked, some bit, some scratched, some gored, some looked edible from far away and became a legal problem up close. Hunting was dangerous. Scavenging was dangerous. Approaching a carcass was dangerous because you might not be the only customer. A wounded animal could still hurt you. A large herbivore could break bones. A predator could tear flesh. A small bite could become infected. Even a successful hunt could produce an injured hunter, which is a very rude way for dinner to arrive. And animals were not the only danger. The landscape was dangerous too. People fell from rocks. They slipped near rivers. They cut themselves while making stone tools. They stepped on sharp objects. They got thorns, splinters, and embedded fragments. They hurt their backs carrying loads. They strained joints. They twisted ankles. They probably had the prehistoric version of saying, "I slept weird," except the bed was dirt and the pillow was a bad decision. Minor injuries stacked up. A scrape here, a bruise there, a sore knee, a cracked tooth, a swollen hand, a bad shoulder, a foot that never stopped hurting. Ancient bodies were not superhero bodies. They were working bodies. They survived by being useful, adaptable, and supported by others. Now let's talk about teeth. Because if you want to understand prehistoric suffering, look at the mouth. A toothache today can turn a normal adult into a haunted Victorian child. In the Stone Age, a tooth problem could be devastating. Teeth were not just for smiling in photos, because photos had not yet arrived to ruin everyone's self-esteem. Teeth processed food. They helped chew tough plants, meat, seeds, nuts, roots, and cooked or uncooked foods. They sometimes worked like tools. They experienced grit, wear, cracks, abscesses, and infection. A cracked tooth could hurt, an abscess could swell, an infection in the jaw could spread, a person could struggle to eat. And there was no dentist saying, "This might feel like a little pressure," right before inventing a new religion of pain. Ancient people could remove teeth in some cases. They could use plant knowledge for pain or inflammation, depending on environment and culture. They could rely on softer foods if others prepared them. They could eat cooked foods that required less chewing. But dental problems could still be serious. Your mouth is very close to your brain for something that makes so many bad decisions. Then there is the question everyone secretly wants answered. Did Stone Age people have medicine? The answer depends on what you mean by medicine. If you mean pharmacies, lab-tested pills, sterile surgery, and someone telling you your insurance is complicated, no. If you mean practical knowledge about plants, wounds, heat, cold, rest, splints, massage, food, and care, then yes, in many ways, people likely had forms of healing knowledge. Humans observe patterns. If a plant reduces pain, people remember. If a leaf irritates skin, people remember. If a wound covered in certain material heals better, people remember. If someone eats a root and then spends 3 days having a spiritual disagreement with their stomach, people definitely remember. Knowledge was stored in stories, elders, practice, scars, and the very ancient scientific method of "do not do what Gary did." But ancient medicine was uneven. Some knowledge worked. Some knowledge probably helped a little. Some knowledge did nothing. Some knowledge may have made things worse. Because humans have always been humans. For every useful plant remedy, there was probably someone confidently rubbing nonsense on a wound because their cousin swore by it. We have not changed as much as we think. There were also extreme practices in later prehistoric and ancient communities, including trepanation, where holes were made in the skull. Some ancient skulls show signs of healing around these openings, meaning some people survived the procedure. The reasons could vary: injury treatment, pain, ritual, beliefs, or things we cannot fully reconstruct. To be clear, this was not every Stone Age person getting budget brain surgery on a Tuesday, but it does show something important. Humans have been trying to treat pain, injury, and suffering for a very long time. Sometimes bravely, sometimes intelligently, sometimes in ways that make modern people hold their heads and whisper, "Please stop improving medicine." Now imagine the actual moment of injury. A person falls during a hunt. They cannot stand properly. Their ankle swells. The group gathers. Someone checks the leg. Someone brings water. Someone looks for wood to support the limb. Someone gets children away from the chaos. Someone watches the tree line because the world did not pause just because your ankle has become a balloon. There is no ambulance. There is only people. People are the ambulance. People are the hospital. People are the food delivery system. People are the emotional support animal, except the animal is also trying to eat you. If the injury is mild, the person may rest for days. The group may slow down. The person may do easier work. They may sit near camp, tend fire, repair tools, process food, teach, watch, sort, scrape, or prepare materials. If the injury is serious, everything becomes harder. Can the group carry them? Can they stay in one place long enough? Is food nearby? Is water nearby? Is the season forgiving? Are predators a problem? Are enemies a problem? Is the wound worsening? Is fever coming? Fever was a bad sign. Today, fever means you check your temperature and search symptoms online until you convince yourself you have either a mild infection or a rare medieval curse. In the Stone Age, fever meant the body was fighting something and nobody could see the enemy. A wound might become red, hot, swollen, painful, and full of pus. A person might shake, sweat, weaken, or become confused. Without antibiotics, some infections resolved, some did not. That uncertainty was part of life. A person could survive a terrible-looking wound. A person could die from something that started small. The The Stone Age was unfair like that. It was not a video game where bigger injuries always do more damage. Sometimes the tiny enemy won. But humans had one advantage that is easy to underestimate: care. Care sounds soft. Care sounds like a motivational poster in an office where everyone is exhausted. But care is technology. Feeding someone who cannot feed themselves is technology. Protecting an injured person is technology. Carrying a person is technology. Sharing food with someone who cannot hunt or gather is technology. Knowing when to move and when to stay is technology. Remembering which plants soothe pain is technology. Teaching children not to touch dangerous things is technology. Care is survival knowledge applied to another body. And in prehistory, care may have been one of the reasons injured people could live long enough for bones to heal. A healed fracture in the archaeological record is not just bone, it is time. Time alive after injury, time protected, time fed, time when someone else probably did extra work. Of course, we must be careful. A healed injury does not always prove a beautiful story of compassion. Some injuries heal without much help. Some interpretations are uncertain. Bones do not come with diary entries. But when we see severe healed injuries in people who would have struggled to survive alone, it strongly reminds us that prehistoric life was not just competition, it was cooperation too. Not because ancient people were saints, because needing each other is older than civilization, and probably older than pretending you are fine when you are absolutely not fine. So what happened if you got injured in the Stone Age? If it was minor, you might heal and continue life with a scar, a story, and a new hatred for sharp rocks. If it was moderate, your group might help you rest, bind the injury, feed you, move slower, or give you different work until you recovered. If it was severe, your survival became uncertain. You might die from blood loss, infection, exposure, starvation, predators, or not being able to move with the group. But you might also survive. Not because the Stone Age was gentle, because humans were not alone. Your ancestors lived in a world without doctors, but not necessarily without care. They lived without antibiotics, but not without knowledge. They lived without hospitals, but not without groups. They lived without emergency rooms, but not without emergency people. A broken leg could be a death sentence. A healed broken leg could be evidence that someone stayed. A scar could be a memory. A limp could be a biography. A missing tooth could be a chapter. A healed wound could be proof that survival was never just about being strong. It was about being helped when strength failed. That is the part people forget. The Stone Age was brutal. It was painful. It was dirty, dangerous, smoky, infected, exhausting, and extremely committed to giving everyone foot problems. But it was also human. And humans, for all our nonsense, have one strange talent. We see someone fall, and sometimes, instead of walking away, we carry them. So the next time you get a paper cut and act like history's greatest warrior, remember this. Your ancestors survived broken bones, bad teeth, burns, animal bites, infected wounds, twisted ankles, and a medical system best described as your cousin knows a leaf. And some of them survived because other people brought them food, kept them warm, protected them, and waited for their bodies to do the slow, ugly miracle of healing. In the Stone Age, injury was not just a wound. It was a test of the body. It was a test of the group. And sometimes, somehow, the group passed.